Okay, well, this is probably going to be the latest recording I've ever done, as it's now 2:50 in the morning.
The late night sesh.
And that's okay, because the show doesn't stop for anyone now, does it?
Neither does a sleep.
Neither does the sleep, and I have had I was going to say I had some sleepless nights over this episode, but really I haven't, and not any much of this season, really. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of TERA CON Prime Time. I am your host, Jeremy, and I have a special host this week. Introduce yourself, sir.
It is the amazing toast.
The Amazing Toast. Do you mind if I call you by your real name, though, sir?
Yes, you can call me Cody.
We actually just watched season 3, episode 11 of Final Space, The Dead Speak, and right off the bat, sir, what would you rate this episode?
I'd give it probably a nice 7 out of 10. There's a lot of great sequences, action packed, and there's a few drama sequences, but there were a few forced areas I felt like that were there that didn't really need to be brought back up, but overall I think it kept the ball rolling the whole time, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, and I would definitely agree. I would definitely give it a 7 out of 10, I think, because like you said, there were still a lot of good action sequences in this episode. There was still some drama. I would agree. Some of it felt forced, and we'll get into that. But like, just kind of like right off the start, like I know I said it last episode, but there was definitely just this kind of like ugly looking Titan, as it were, the Lord Titan. He's still really ugly to me. I do not like his design, but you know what? I guess as this sort of incomprehensible, is that a word?
It is.
You ever have that happen where you say a word and you're just like, is that a real word?
All the time.
Yeah,
All
just
the
like,
time. It happens all the time.
okay, because I was just like, incomprehensible. It just sounded like a fake word to me just then. But to get back on track, so we had really ugly Lord Titan, and then just damn fucking Rip Bolo, like just fucking dies. His head gets ripped off, and the team squad's like, "Oh we need to get out of here."
Yeah, it was really sad watching his mane of lioness just float in space like that. I'm like, oh, that's heartbreaking.
It just seemed so, that moment, I guess, in another word or another sense of the word forced, kind of feels like, because like you're talking about two titans, and Bolo has very clearly shown off his strength earlier in this season, taking on a different titan and showing him who's boss and ripping his head off and stuff like that. And you're telling me he's getting blindsided by the Lord Titan, getting stabbed, like he couldn't juke out of the way and protect himself? Like he just dies that easily?
Or like in the previous episode where he had changed his height or his size.
Yeah.
Like he was a miniature about the same size as Gary or Quinn. I mean, granted, I understand like the distraction point, but at the same time, you're right on that, where he could have easily dodged it.
Well, it just seems like I don't know if I necessarily want to call that lazy writing, because like, okay, in that sense it shows that the Lord Titan means business, and he's down to clown, as it were, and he wants to kill everyone that he does not approve of or whatever.
Kind of setting a bar.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we already knew he was kind of insane and a sociopath, and this just definitely keeps that ball rolling, as it were. But it's just like, really? That's how Bolo dies? Like, not even putting up a fucking fight. He just lets himself get stabbed and peace out, dude. Like,
Well, like we didn't even really get that much of Bolo this season. Like we got like bits and pieces here and there. Like, yeah, there was the part where he teams up with Mooncake for just a few segments, and then later there's a part where they have to go into the depths of his mind and save him from himself. But like almost directly after that, it's just, oh, there's Bolo to be a distraction, kind of pass away.
I feel like a lot. I still love the show, but I feel like a lot of side characters, as it were not treated all that well this season. Like, fair point with that. Bolo, I feel like, what was it? Like season 2, like we had the free Bolo, and there's this big moments for that, and like he's finally free, and we barely get to discover his abilities in season 3, as it were, like being able to transform down to a smaller size and kill other titans and stuff like that. And then he's just killed off at a moment's notice. And Kevin, my biggest complaint about poorly treated characters, besides Clarence, because clearly that was a poorly treated character this season, Kevin has been a big gripe for me. I may have not like really vocalized it because there hasn't been much to talk about with him, but like this episode, I just did not like Kevin in the sense of the way that he was written. Like, like the reason why we fell in love, quote unquote, fell in love with Kevin season 1 was because he was this, very annoying character to Gary. Like his big moment was, like nothing but holes and stuff like that. Like it worked when he was just sort of off, not necessarily doing his own thing, but like, his whole little song about nothing but holes, very iconic moment for the show. And then for them to have this sort of callback to it in this episode, like telling Avocado to plug these holes and telling all these other people to just start doing stuff, it just didn't feel
the same.
It didn't feel the same. It doesn't feel like it's the same Kevin from season 1. And I mean, I guess there's something to be said because he originally died in season 1 and was brought back to life using his pilot body for season 2. But like,
lost his sanity saving Fox because he had to take out his chip.
Yeah, and it's just like even later in the episode where they see the dead Gary and he's like, oh, I wish somebody was recording that. It's just like, that's not Kevin, though. Like, Kevin is not like, oh, I want to kill Gary. At least I don't remember him ever being like, I want to kill Gary. His whole thing was, you are my buddy that I need to keep, sane. And I'm going to keep you sane by doing all these magic tricks and stuff. Like he doesn't realize he's making Gary insane by trying to keep him happy.
Kind of like an annoying little chihuahua, I guess you could say, that he always gets excited to see.
Yeah, exactly. And like that whole moment of just being like, oh, I wish somebody recorded this Gary's death. It's like, what the hell? No, like this is not Kevin to me. And I previously sort of complained about, the voice in season 1 being a little more robotic, and all the way up to season 3 now, it's just like, it's literally just Fred Armisen just going like, hey, I'm a robot. What's up? Like, it's not the same. Kevin feels a little different. And I know I've, talked ad nauseum in previous episodes about how Tribor just doesn't work this season.
It doesn't fit the other puzzle pieces, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess a smoother way to transition into my next point about Kevin was, like Quinn going like, oh no, the Kevin net, it didn't work. Like, we have to use the Kevin net. And it's just like, we just saw this not work. Like, why are you thinking that it's going to work if we just saw it not work? Like, abandon that plot point.
Well, and the one thing I thought about that too that I was gonna add on to was with the KVN Net, like when we saw that shot of all the others, like there's got to be more than one KVN Net. You'd think that there'd be more than one KVN Net.
You would think, and also like at this point, since we're already kind of jumping all around the episode as it were, like towards the end we get the revelation that there are multiple Earths inside Final Space, which would lead me to believe that like why would you abandon, like if there are multiple Earths, that could potentially mean that there are multiple Kevins if they haven't died already, because there are multiple Garys, and they're already insinuating that there are multiple Titans within those Earths waiting to be hatched, which means that there potentially could be multiple KVN Nets. And it's just like, I do agree with this whole plot point of like, you know what? We tried that. It didn't work. Now it's just time to save our skin and get the hell out of Dodge, as it were. Like, I agree with that. But at the same time, it's just like, if we're setting up the possibility of more Earths with more Titans and a Titan army, doesn't that mean that all of those Earths also had a KVN waiting for their Nightfall or their Gary or whatever to get in contact with them and relaunch the KVN Net? Like, at that point, it's just like, why not? You still might be on the hunt from the Lord Titan. Like, he didn't follow you. He doesn't know where you are right now. Maybe Invictus knows where all of these Earths are, but at this point, you're kind of undiscovered, which means you could cause a lot of chaos with everything, which means like you'd be able to hopefully maybe destroy all those Titans, as it were. And then suddenly you have 50 Kevin Van Newtons, all of these Earth's greatest roboticists, as it were, come together and make one giant KVN Net and like, super mega awesome laser, destroy everything, all the Titans. Yeah, like you could have explored that, but, instead, we get the plan of let's leave Final Space and save our skins, which I do support because that is probably the more interesting option right now versus, me trying to rewrite the show, just being like, yes, all this heroic deeds, as it were. Let's, really fucking do it, guys. But to get back sort of on topic, I know you sort of mentioned previously, or earlier rather, you mentioned earlier that, there were some forced moments in the show, and I'll let you start with that.
So, back in the episode where we had Hugh be overridden by the Starfleet, what happened was Quinn and Avocado kind of got at each other's backs a lot. And we see that kind of resurface in this episode. And it's been about a good season in between all this, where you'd think that they'd have gotten past a lot of this, where Avocado's just really being snotty with her, and it just feels like a lot of forced tension and a lot of forced conflict that you wouldn't really... I mean, yes, I know that they'd be at each other's necks, like last episode where Avocado and Gary got at each other, but that's a different kind of conflict where Avocado just told him, hey, this isn't really my son, but it's stuff like that. That's an actual kind of conflict, where this was just kind of out of nowhere and just being kind of an ass to him. And it just didn't mix well with me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, great point. Just because I definitely agree, because, this whole turning on Quinn, it's just like, Gary's having his quote unquote pep talk of how everything's going wrong and he doesn't have, the answer, the hoorah, as it were, to finish up the rally. And yeah, Avocado just kind of comes out of the blue just being like, we should have left, it's all your fault, Quinn. And it's like, whoa, hold on, time out. Like, there was no reason for that. I get the tensions are high, but like that definitely felt forced because it's the team squad, ride or die at this point. For him to just outright come out and say that, it definitely just felt like, okay, this is the writing team just being like, okay, what is our tension this episode? Oh, well, you know what? Let's start ramping up the tension, first by being chased by the Lord Titan, and then Avocado threatens to mutiny because he's mad at, Quinn, and then suddenly Invictus finds us, like the ramping tensions, as it were. But I don't think you necessarily needed that stepping stone with Avocado getting mad at Quinn to start ramping up the tension.
I mean, I got more tension from the part with Gary's mom and Ash. I saw more tension in that because Ash is still kind of battling Invictus and trying to figure out whose side she's on. Like that's more tension. That's more honest character building and kind of conflict right there. Whereas the thing between Avocado and Quinn just felt unnecessary. Like I could see him trying to bond more, like have Quinn talk about her sister on the difficulties that brought that could bring up. Like I could see him bond between that more.
Well, then you also had like Cheryl's little moment of maybe copying Gary, or Gary just having it in him, just being like, "You good?" Like I don't mind that becoming a reoccurring sort of joke, as it were, a reoccurring line, because it's just it's not a good thing to ask people, but it's very funny that they are asking it.
It's the good speed way.
Yeah, it's the good speed way. Hey, you good?
Hey, you good?
When Avocado and Quinn started fighting, as it were, and we're getting invaded by Invictus, and there's a bunch of dead Garys on board, and Quinn decides, I'm going to team up with Avocado. Like, okay, you could kind of see through the veil there, as it were, just like, oh, this is Quinn about to confront Avocado about what he said. Okay, so we're going to get some resolution here. But there were some valid points made all around from both parties, in the sense of, like Avocado saying like, we should have left. It would have been safer for us. And Quinn's being like, you didn't have to stay behind. You had the opportunity to, but you chose to stay behind with the rest of us. And it's just like, valid point, but also just like, did they have the opportunity to leave? Like, I get it that they were still on Earth and maybe they could have, scrounged up a different, ship for them to use. But otherwise, like, you had the portal floating up in the air. Tribor and the Resistance had already left, like, didn't even bother offering anyone else a ride. Like, they're just fucking gone. So, like, did they really have the opportunity to leave Final Space at that moment? I'm having a hard time kind of believing that, just because of what they were trying to set up. Like, we're going to kill a Titan with, with whatever technology we have. And this whole other point of like Avocado just being like, we all got Final Space poisoning, and Quinn somehow blindsided by this information. Like, girl, you were the first one in Final Space to get Final Space poisoning. You should understand, the longer that you're in Final Space, the more poison you get. You should have had this in the back of your mind, just being like, oh, hey, we're all in Final Space now. We're all getting sick from this. And so for her to just be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I never knew that you were getting sick. It's just like, really? No, I don't believe that for 1 second, because Quinn is a smart woman. She is in the Infinity Guard. She knows about, gravitational disturbances like that. Like our first introduction to this woman is her writing down, math and science equations on a fucking napkin. And you're telling me she doesn't have the thought process to just be like, hey, I think the rest of my teammates are getting sick from Final Space poisoning. Like, that just does not make sense.
We don't really know how it works either. Like, we know it poisons you it messes up a lot of your system. But like when you exit final space, what happens with the prolonged poisoning effects? Does it still stay? Does it go? There's a whole aura of mystery about how final space poisoning works in my mind.
Oh, absolutely.
And like that's kind of bringing it into this next point that I wanted to kind of point out is how selfish is Quinn and how like selfless is she? Because there's actually a few moments, well, a few mini moments I'd like to say where she's honestly kind of a selfish person and just in general, I'd say.
Well, I mean, everyone is. Everyone is in this show. And, like, you cannot be a human being and not be selfish. But I get what you're saying. She has a lot of selfish moments and a lot of selfless moments.
Like even Cheryl, for the first beginning of her character, she was a very selfish kind of a person. And into this next trajectory of this phase, like we've noticed she's been a lot more selfless. It's been more for Gary and his friends and the team. And where we've seen Ash, who was selfless before with her brother Fox. She was selfless for that whole first bit, and now it's kind of getting into that selfish area to where she's getting more pulled into herself because she just lost her brother. She just lost her adopted dad. And so now she doesn't know what to do. She doesn't know who to trust. It's coming back onto her. Where Quinn is always kind of stayed that I'd say selfish kind of a thing, because she never really at first cared for Gary. We've never seen her care for Gary in the beginning. And then when they get into final space, she started caring for Gary more. Then when they talked to the dead Gary, it kind of glanced over that fact that, and this is what I was getting to was, and this kind of hits home for a lot of people, I'd say, is that effect of being in a relationship with a person and like knowing like you care like Gary is very selfless of a person altogether, and he's always there for Quinn, but Quinn was never really there for Gary. Like all of the Garys out in space have a Quinn, and none of those Quinns ever went for that Gary.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, and that was kind of a big moment on both sides of the equation, how, like, in all these previous timelines, you know, Gary was always the one to sacrifice himself, and Quinn never came. And now in this timeline, it's finally reversed, where Quinn was the one to sacrifice herself and Gary came for her. But also, like, just sort of getting into that too, that whole thing of it's just interesting, because if I'm remembering correctly right now, and this is just kind of like hitting me right now, like in season 1 or season 2 or whatever it is, like Nightfall has this moment of like, in all of my timelines, you know, and maybe I'm just remembering this wrong, but like in all of my timelines, you know, I could never save my Gary, and I was at my breaking point when Bolo reached out and we could change the world. And so, like, does that mean she never could get back into final space? Does that mean she wasn't trying to save her Gary's? Like, and then, like, does that mean whatever parallel universe that Nightfall was in, that particular Quinn was in, could only go so far as she could until Bolo had to step in and then set up all of what was going on for what we now know as final space, where it suddenly flips and Quinn is the one to sacrifice herself and close the breach. And Gary, for the first time, really, well, or rather on the first try, manages to save Quinn instead. I don't even know where I'm going with this point right now. Like the neurons are firing right now, baby, but I don't know what they're connecting to.
Well, and that's the other thing that you kind of brought up that my brain kind of latched onto right there was you have all these Garys that have potentially closed the breach, but in that same time, all the ones that Nightfall visited, she says that Gary has always died by the Lord Commander, and so there's a lot of different timelines that kind of jumble around. Like, there's Garys that survived, there's Garys that didn't survive, and there were still Earths that were pulled into final space. There's a lot that my brain tries to mash up into there. And it's kind of hard to think about because, like, what happened to all those Quinns? Did all those Quinns survive? Well, actually, now that I think about it, I wonder if a lot of the Quinns probably passed away, because remember in the first episode where she was jettisoned out into a life pod because the fleet was coming after her, and they got sucked into final space. The ship oh no, that wasn't the ship. That was or was it the Star?
That was the Infinity Guard.
Mm-hmm. The Infinity Guard came after her, and she got captured. She jettisoned from a life pod, but that fleet, I believe, got sucked into final space.
Oh, they did.
She was stranded out in that life pod, just dangling about. So I trying to picture if a few Quinns might have died that way.
Probably.
In which Nightfall probably brought herself into those ones. But she said a lot of those that the Lord Commander had killed Gary. And so what happens if the Lord Commander had killed Gary? Wouldn't final space still open?
Oh, more than likely, because I think the implication is if Gary had been killed, then the Lord Commander probably somehow got Mooncake and destroyed the universe, as it were. And I mean, in the infinite timelines, that could potentially happen. I'm sure a lot of, there's a lot of overlap, and, if X happens, Y happens, but because of Y happens, Z doesn't happen. But actually, in this other timeline, X and Y both did not happen, which means Z could never happen. Just in that realm of infinite possibilities, we just happen to get
the special scenario.
Yeah, the one timeline that will actually overlap into what we know as final space, because, like I said, that one Quinn happened to be at her wit's ends, and Bolo approached her, and they finally figured out a way to stop everything. Sort of that interesting point of being selfish versus selfless. It was really interesting, in my opinion, to hear Avocado accuse Quinn of playing the Messiah card, as it were. You have to be the savior. And it's well, technically now, from what we've learned, Gary was the one in previous timelines or in alternate timelines trying to play the Messiah card, and Quinn either tried to save him and didn't, or potentially even just pieced out. It's just I didn't care for that dude. That guy. That could have happened too. But for our particular timeline, it seems like they're setting up Quinn as, the Messiah, as it were, I need to be the one to close the breach. I need to be the one to help kill the Titan, rather, and do the KVN Net. And so now, that little moment of, towards the end, Ash saying, Nightfall would never back down from a fight. And Gary's just being hello, this is Nightfall, and she's backing down from a fight because she's also Quinn. So yes, Quinn would absolutely do that.
And that's another point, is it's not the exact Nightfall that it's a different type of Nightfall. It's not going to be the same.
And also, it's not really Nightfall. It just looks like Nightfall. It looks like Nightfall, but it's not Nightfall. It's a shapeshifter. You need to beware, Ash.
Just this isn't the same Gary as before. This is a different Gary.
And at least that one Gary who died on the ship at least had hopefully maybe one fleeting thought of, I got to see Quinn, bleh. Just keels over and dies. Which, what do they do with all of those bodies? I know they're never going to address that because, it's just going to be easier to just brush it aside, quite literally, brush all the bodies off the Dragonhawk 5 and not deal with it. But, Gary has got to be a little upset from this. Even if they don't show it, just these are all dead me's. This is not okay. I'm not comfortable with seeing this amount of dead me's in front of me.
Imagine even just like shooting countless like bodies of yourself that are rotting corpses with glowing purple eyes just running at you. That would be that'd be a psychiatrist's fun dig into the psyche for that. Well, in Little Biscuit, you don't see very much of Little Biscuit in this. Like, he helps, but at the same time, he's there, but he disappears. I will say that.
Yeah, he's living up his role of comedic support character because Biscuit makes a biscuit machine gun, as it were.
Mm-hmm. The cookie machine gun.
That was for all of our United Kingdom fans across the pond because they call cookies biscuits. So the plan is now, after all of this, and it's revealed that everyone's sick from final space poisoning, and we finally, after we see all these Earths, we finally decide to leave final space.
Mm-hmm.
We only have 2 episodes left this season. What the hell are they going to do in 2 episodes?
I was trying to compile that as well. It's just, we got 2 episodes of a lot of stuff, and it could be anything, and my brain was just trying to conjure up, like, we have Invictus, we have the Lord Titan, and the Lord Titan and Invictus don't really see eye to eye right now. I guess we have a few other story points, but since the army is gone with Tribor in the portal, you don't really have a huge army to go against Invictus with anything.
It's like, okay, well, Tribor is clearly going to have his Messiah moment then, come in at the very last moment and just be like, I'm here again with my resistance, and I'm here to save you with my resistance. And it's just, if that happens, that's just going to be so fucking boring. But also, like, the portal that you entered, I guess, has now been flung off into space. Just willy-nilly at this point. So there's no way you're going to know. Like if the team squad does not manage to find the teleporter and they need to somehow get Tribor to save them, he's just going to come out in a random fucking point and, he could be, in theory, light years away or something like at this point, which in real world time is a lot because we don't have light folding technology yet. In the final space lore, though, that's a snap and you're there. But that's just going to be boring if that happens. And, I'm not going to say it's a prediction or anything. It just feels more like an inevitability at this point that that's going to happen. But then also, the Lord Titan is seemingly turning on Invictus at this point. And it's just like, with him killing all of these Titans, it's just conveniently okay, he was distracted for a while killing all these Titans, even though his real goal was really to try and, stop and kill the team squad. So conveniently, he was occupied for about an hour's worth of time, let's just say.
Another thing that I was thinking of is, and this is just fun spitballing, but imagine the Lord Commander went into a Titan and got his powers like that. Imagine if any of the team squad got into one of the Titans and somehow got powers like that.
Well, now you're just giving the fans OC ideas. Titan Sona's incoming.
A gigantic Fantraxian just roaming around.
But otherwise, Mr. Cody, do you have any final thoughts on the episode?
One thing that I say I will like about the episode was the little bonding experience between Gary and Locato, walking through the ship kind of by themselves. It was kind of a wholesome moment where they were just walking through, and that's something that me and a friend would do. Just walking through, it's is it okay? It's kind of spooky in here. Yeah, just hold the flashlight. I can do this. It is kind of an adorable moment just watching that.
Yeah, we had our little dad speed moment, and just, well, what happens if we see something? Well, we kill it. Simple math. I like it. It's yeah, okay. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, I definitely like this episode too. I definitely really liked a lot of the action, a lot of the animation and the camera work, quote unquote camera work, as it were, was really good this episode. It was very, very agile in that sense. There was a lot of moving, a lot of point of view shots actually this time around, which was kind of refreshing, like a different sort of thing that we don't necessarily see from the show. And like this episode was refreshing in that sense. But again, it's just kind of like sort of a hodgepodge mishmash of just, was it a great episode or just an okay episode? And what's it really trying to set up? Well, thank you for tuning in to another episode of TERA CON Prime Time. Once again, my name was Jeremy.
And this is Cody.
And we will see you in a future episode where we review Season 3, Episode 12, The Leaving. So it sounds like, to me, Cody, we're finally going to leave Final Space.
And what are they going to bring back, though? That's the real question.
Good vibes and a bunch of alcohol. All right, we'll see you guys.
See ya.